was gonna stammer, I'd rather stammer while trying to be cool. Otherwise I keep my mouth shut because it'd be awkward anyway.
Alexander Kuzmenko is here. Finding Voices podcast is back.
On this glorious, sunny Saturday afternoon here in, what's the region?
Today we're in Venice Beach.
Venice Beach!
Little Venice Beach in London.
As you can see by the immensely ripped guy sitting in front of you.
Stuttering. And we have a...
ripped stuttering guys, who are hotter than the ripped guys you see on Venice Beach, by far.
Okay, I'm Eugene Masowski Gallagher.
I'm Tom Wheeler.
So the topic of podcast number 17 is why, Tom, you returned to using techniques.
And also another topic I'd like to throw in after you've discussed this is the difference between speech absolutism and speech relativism. And I'll explain those terms
later on
in a bit.
Cool.
Okay, so why I've returned to using techniques. So in the previous few videos you might have seen that I haven't been using techniques. It's been quite obvious, I presume. And the reason why I've slowly started to come back to using techniques, and I'm using them now, is because I found, for whatever reason, my speech and my mentality as a consequence was taking a hit. I think it was, and I can only really speculate, but I presume it was the overwhelming sense of being out of control really got to me more than it did before. And the speech techniques give me a sense of control, which I didn't used to have. I also approached the no technique style of talking with the mentality that I was experimenting. I was seeing if I could see something that I'd missed from out of control stuttering before I went on any programs, and just testing people's reactions. And I really enjoyed some moments when people I wouldn't have dared stutter with out of control, I did, and felt a really kind of sense of accomplishment. But ultimately that only took me so far before it just became I can't continually challenge myself to just stutter out of control in front of people simply for the sake of it. There has to be something more than just I'm doing this to prove a point to myself. So that's why I'm back to using techniques, because ultimately really the thing that makes speaking to people worthwhile is the sense of connection. And if I'm continually focusing on what the hell's happening to me, then I lose that intimacy because I'm constantly in my own head, when in reality I should be in that other person's head and understanding what they're trying to say.
I have a question from that then, because how long ago did you begin the Maguire course?
2014. But I haven't been a regular member.
5 years. Cool. So you would have had, my point is I wanted to get the feeling of you've done the no technique thing with the feeling of a loss, right?
Yes. Rather
than how you would have spoken before any of the speech therapy, where this is all you knew and you would just have, I presume, felt frustration instead.
Yes. So I've seen, as you say, I've seen both sides of it. I've seen me stuttering out of control and there's no safety net, versus me stuttering out of control knowing that I can come back to the techniques when I want to. So I've seen both sides. Yeah.
So the hit you sort of felt on your mentality then was more from, I don't know, I suppose it might have been a disappointment or something like that. Like,
yeah, I suppose.
Knowing that I could be doing this really well, but I'm not for these reasons, and as a result, it's not ideal for your mental well-being.
Yeah, essentially it was a sense of kind of failure in the end, in that as much as I was achieving a goal of stuttering out of control with people that I wouldn't normally have done so, it's a bit of a hollow victory when ultimately the reason why you're talking to them in the first place is to understand. It is not simply to make sounds different to how they are speaking and prove a point. So it ran its course, but ultimately I feel more comfortable using this.
So if you were to do the same thing again, like for the reason for asking this is any speech therapy program tends to wear off eventually, right?
Yeah.
And therefore the best therapy you can have is one that should last for a long period. And the single problem with every speech therapy is they haven't figured out how to make it last for a longer period. So the question is, if you could do the same thing again, but not as an experiment, like as a long-term life plan, what would you change about your approach to make it work in the longer term? Like, for instance, like using some technique, trying to remember certain things, so it isn't purely out of control, but there is an element of control which you can switch on or switch off freely as you talk. So what sort of strategy?
I think ultimately I would choose the control sense, but only because of where I stand now on what I want out of speaking. Because formerly I was very much, I just want to be relaxed, have no thought about how I speak, but I realised that speaking, as much as even if I was to be perfectly fluent, is an integral part of how I relate to other people. And I really value people who speak eloquently. Maybe that is because I have a history of out of control stuttering. And so ultimately I would use control simply because I do like eloquent speech. I think it is a useful thing in your life to have eloquence. It's a way of doors seem to open more easily if you're speaking eloquently. It's just a way of making life easier for you. And
So a follow-on question from that, which has obviously plagued every stammerer since the beginning of time, is
since Moses himself.
Because you never know, he might have stammered too.
He did.
Well, okay, exactly. That's the point.
That's why I said it.
So you're saying about speaking with the control. So as a stammerer, we obviously pick our battles. There's some sentences where like, I'm going to stammer on this anyway, so I'm not going to even start saying it because there's no way this will work well.
Let it go.
It's like even if it is the most witty comeback, you're like, nah, screw it, it's not going to happen.
Save it for a rainy day.
With your control, then, how would you be picking your battles? Same as sort of pre-speech therapy you?
As in, I wouldn't. By that, do you mean I would avoid certain situations and words if they were just too troubling?
Well, no, as in like because inevitably you'll get yourself into some sort of scenario at some point, and you then have to choose. I can either continue on with this, if I can do it spontaneously and just stammer my way through it. But wouldn't be great, wouldn't be bad, it's just going to happen. Or you could take your time with it and do it well. Or you could think, nah, screw it, I'm out. I will stammer my way through it, and I really can't be bothered.
probably take my time. But I should say that the ultimate state is to be almost unconscious of stuttering.
Yeah.
That's, I think, what everyone strives for, is the unaware stutter. Because I've met people like that who just stutter, but they don't even realise that they are stuttering. And in a way, that's the ideal state, because then you can move on to other stuff, and it's not part of your life in that sense.
It's like training to be a Zen master or a mindfulness.
Yeah,
thing.
essentially.
You need to have like some process or steps to get to that point. It's like everyone has the same goal, but the routes we're all trying to figure out, because some of them work, some of them don't work, we're all trying to figure out what works for us.
But that said,
that's why I'm sort of leaning on it for what routes would you pick to get there.
I think in a way it's something which would come quite naturally. I've tried my best to be totally oblivious to stuttering and just ignore it, but try as I might, I've yet to reach a stage where I am unself-conscious about it. And I think ultimately it's almost like the acceptance route of just continuing this, like, I'm gonna stutter all the bloody time with my techniques, is in a way the way of losing it. So it's almost like by drawing more attention to it, I'm losing it. Essentially, I think most of this is rooted in how you are biologically. Like those people that I mentioned who stutter and it's not really affecting them tend to be those who've never taken any interest in their stutter and never really noticed it. And this, I think, is almost like a biological thing. They aren't conscious about it, or they aren't anxious about it. And I've been in a state like that before, after taking ADHD pills, which turned off my sense of anxiety. And I know that that's a possible state.
Cool,
But that's related to, I think, sensitivity.
Yeah.
So ultimately that's more about the mentality, and that's more like a chemical thing, I think. But the lines between what separates a chemical imbalance from a psychological imbalance is next to none. It's always the same thing. Like your psychology is made up of like a physical structure, like that like way of physically mapping your psychology. Anyway, on to the next topic.
Yeah, on to the next topic.
Hold on,
Alex will say
I have a comment. Well, if you keep a diary, maybe you can go back. I thought that what you did with this out of controlled stuttering is that was an exercise, and the exercise was that your exercise was self-acceptance. You self-accepted yourself as a person who stuttered.
So and how to control personally stuff.
Well, yeah,
Most
you
importantly.
accepted yourself for who you are, what you do, and you didn't hold back. So you stopped holding back. And the point was that without disclosure, without any technique, just go as you are, stop holding back, right?
That's true. I did start with that.
Yeah, and that was the idea, as I remember it. And I think in a way psychologically it worked, but what suffered in this exercise was the communication. And when the communication suffered, like a two-way thing, it was disruptions in the traffic both ways when the communication suffers. So to improve that and to express yourself better and self-actualize through telling, through the communication with other people, social fucking animals, right? We have to do that. So to self-actualize, we actually have to communicate. And I think to do that better, maybe with the use of a technique, but all the techniques are psychological or not. What techniques are you using at the moment? And I think I know the answer, but what's the result of the use of a technique? Is it more psychological, or is it like more physical or communicational? Like what techniques?
Well, I think it's affected all areas, like psychology, communication, everything has been affected by it. My techniques, if you couldn't guess, is essentially using DD. Not much else actually, maybe taking a breath before I speak, but it's mainly DD. I only started using it about a week ago because I reached kind of like a rock bottom point where I was just like, I was holding back in conversations a bit, and if I wasn't holding back, I wasn't having the same connection with other people. That was a kind of the straw that broke the camel's back kind of moment where I was like, this can't keep on going on like this.
So, because I have been taking a different strategy to your one, because yours is you're deliberately, in essence, breaking up the communication.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just rolling with the broken communication.
Yeah. That's the strategy that works for you.
Yeah, it's partly from laziness, because I don't have to think as much as your one does. But the end result is the exact same. It still sounds like you're stammering some of the time. But
it's the mentality. But then again, I suppose my issue is that as much as it might seem like it's easier in that you are having to put much thought in, what if the returns of not using technique mean that you're having to do a lot more like, oh, I'll just have to forget about it.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot more processing in that front than just using technique.
True.
So it's like, in a way, you're still using the same amount of thought processes, but for yours, it might be like a post-speaking thought process where it's like, okay, I stuttered more than just have to just think about forgetting about it and digesting what happened. But for mine, it's like I'm using that thinking process in the present moment, maybe.
Yes.
So I think in a way they both use processes, but it just seems easier.
Yeah.
Because in the moment it's easier.
Yours is more proactive and positive. Mine's more reactive and
I wouldn't say negative.
Well,
I just say it's less proactive.
Yeah, and can have a lot more regret attached to it.
It has essentially it's like a
potentially it can have a lot more regret.
Essentially, it's a higher risk one.
Yeah.
And that you run the risk of having a really, really bad block and then having to do a lot of like thinking for half a minute about what I've just done.
The flip side is most of the time you won't have a bad block, so you end up accepting yourself much more, which in turn makes the block less likely. So it's I don't know, I'm beginning to think it's like whatever strategy you end up picking, you have to stick with it for a long time to see if it actually works or not. And
but even then,
if it breaks, you have to be confident enough to change your strategy. Stop freaking holding on to one that doesn't work.
But sometimes these strategies might just have a natural like moment of lull, like how a comparison you might use is with how like in politics, the strategy that got George Bush into power, Obama into power, almost Hillary into power, just happened to not work that one time Trump was running. But 9 times out of 10 in subsequent elections, they'll still work and still work. So occasionally there's like a break in the system that isn't say that the system is permanently broken. It's just that it might have a slight weakness, which you can kind of live with. And essentially it's like an Achilles heel that is just like a necessary part of whatever technique you're using.
It could be that, like, because I was watching another physics YouTube channel. One of the quotes from that is the presenter on that said her physics teacher drummed this one message into her head, which was that physics is modeling the world. It isn't here's how the world works. It is here's a model which works reasonably good
most of the time.
Yeah. And it's like every now and then something screws it up. Royally, and everyone's like, "What the hell happened there?" And
it's a rule of thumb.
It's like, so speech therapy, you could almost take the same view that because really no one even the person who stammers understands why, how, or whatever about their own stammer. So having someone else say, here's speech therapy, which is the third person's interpretation of your own stammer, which you don't know anything about, and they don't know anything about, but there are enough similarities to mean it'll work most of the time.
Yeah. It's the whole rule of thumb where like there is no perfect solution, there's no absolute cure.
Because you'll probably have to live a few thousand years, then you'll be like, right, I finally cracked why I stammer. You're like, well.
And the reason why we're having to live 1,000 years to find a cure is because no one's paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think if millions and millions of dollars was to be streamlined to the Stuttering Foundation, and it'd be like 15 lab experiments being conducted at any one moment in time, we would definitely get a lot closer to finding a so-called cure. But it's just simply because we're an extreme minority that means there's less of a chance. But anyway,
we digress.
We digress again.
So the next topic is the absolutism or something, and
I'll explain the concept.
Relativism of the same something. But I forgot what the something was.
Let me explain it in the stuttering terms.
Yeah.
So when a fluent person talks about fluency, it's ideal fluency. When a stuttering person talks about fluency, it's a relative fluency. It's relative to the worst stuttering he has.
Almost.
Yeah.
It's along those lines.
So this articulated eloquence might mean not fluency, but maybe not blocking, or maybe not blocking out of control. Maybe blocking on purpose would be enough. So that's relative. And when I say that I'm a fluent person, I mean I'm a person who stutters, right? So I say it from a stuttering perspective, that I can say what I want to say, how I want to say it, almost all the time. Not 100%. But I call that fluency because I know where I came from.
That's a good point. But actually my theme of absolutism versus relativism in stuttering terms was that if we use an absolutist model of speech, there is the best form of speech, and that is that used by, the great speakers of the modern age. That's used by Richard Dawkins, Stephen Fry, Christopher Hitchens, great rhetoricians, people who have rhetoricians. These are people who are great raconteurs. They speak really well in public on debate shows. Like they just wow people with like how they can pull out of the bag really funny one-liners. Basically, it's basically people who have a silver tongue. They're extremely eloquent, extremely erudite, everything.
They use techniques, right? Like when they're super eloquent, when we hear them talk, it's actually well practiced, like a technique.
Not necessarily practiced. Like I'm thinking of people like Christopher Hitchens. I don't think for a moment practiced how he spoke. I think he was just naturally quite an eloquent person. Anyway, and these are the people at the absolute pinnacle of the absolutist speech hierarchy. Like they are the best speakers, and the further you deviate from this high standards, the worse your speech is. So by that metric, stuttering is the worst form of speech because it is the least orderly. It's the slowest, it's this, that and the other. It's all the things which this speech, which is the best speech, is not, and therefore it's bad. So the good speech is the Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens speaking. Alan Watts. Basically, really good rhetoricians. The bad speech is how we speak. We are bad speakers by this metric. However, the model put forward by speech therapists and other people maybe in this kind of more therapy world is speech is relative. The way that Richard Dawkins speaks is just one form of speech. The way that we speak is another form of speech, isn't it?
I want to interrupt.
Go for it.
Thank you.
Go for it.
So you said that we are bad speakers, but
By this model.
By this model, but maybe you're substituting bad communication, bad communicationers.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Instead of speakers.
Okay, sure.
Because that is two different things. Like I can be bad speaker, like naturally, like this and that had a defect, right?
Yeah, sure.
But then still I can be a good communicator.
Okay, that's a good point.
I think
you're right.
in the stuttering world, what happens, it's actually communication suffers.
Yes, it's the swapping words and making
we
things
think, yes, and we
word
think
salads.
it's
like that.
because of bad speech, but maybe not. Okay, I'm sorry. Go
No,
on.
no.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you for correcting me there. I think it is communication more than speech. Anyway, from the speech therapy world perspective, relativism is the prevailing mode of thought. It says that the way that that person who takes a minute to say his own name is communicating is as equally good as the way that Richard Dawkins, after saying his name in like an instant and then waxing lyrical about atheism or something, is. Basically it says that we are all equal in this communication world, and therefore stuttering isn't a problem. It is a problem of hierarchy. It's a problem of other people looking down on speech, and therefore it's just the perceptions that need to be changed. And this is the speech therapy model.
Yes.
But this is also an issue because it's not the case if you talk to people in the street and you take a minute to say your own name. There is obviously something which means it isn't just, oh, they just have a different manner of speaking, it takes them a bit longer.
Yeah.
No, this is actually becoming a physical barrier to communication, which means that the absolutism model might be right. And this is where the Maguire program comes into play, because the Maguire program essentially accepts the absolutist model, says yes, there is the best speech and there is the bad speech, and while we can never reach the absolute best speech, we can still reach the almost good enough speech, and that's what we can do. And this is why speech therapists don't like it, because they're basically accepting what the world seems to be saying to them and working with it.
Yeah.
They're being more pragmatic about the world being this kind of dog-eat-dog. If you're slow at speaking, then tough shit.
I think so. Basically, the absolutist view is what would the school kids say?
Yes,
which is like,
but
he speaks slowly, or he has a 1 foot which is slightly bigger than the other, or whatever.
Yeah.
And
he is bad, he is good.
Well,
Black and white thinking.
Yeah, with really arbitrary grounds for these decisions. Like, there is no view of like, it's actually perfectly normal. Yeah. But this particular class thinks, nah, that's a weird looking thing. So because socially, the whole social structure has been evolved to accept well, has been evolved to be accepted within your community. So the view therefore should be that the absolutist view is correct, because you're trying to fit in with the community to be accepted.
Yeah.
And which does hit numerous philosophical and moral problems on the way.
Oh, it does, naturally.
Because there's a
This is
load of
entirely
those
rid of the problems.
which, like,
it's an incredibly damaging thing
yeah, it opens
to say to people, you're fucked.
Yeah. It opens
terrible.
up a massive can of worms. And I don't really want
I
to.
have a theory.
Yeah.
So, stuttering is a communication disorder, and the way it shows itself is that the information we're trying to pass to a person, we don't pass it fully, because this space passage, it occupied with the other information we're passing through it, but not through our speech. And what I'm talking about, when I talk to a person fluently, right, person can understand me easily because there are no other distractions I put into my communication. Speech is only 20%, right? But when I block, I still transport a shitload of information on a person. And what kind of information is that? Is that how conversation is important to me? How much I pay attention to those things?
There's subtle
How much meaning I put in my own name? I can't say it for a minute, you know. And how much I put into a self-image of myself. And we still communicating, so 100% of communication going, but we put this garbage, and while we put all this shit, we're trying to say something and expect person to read it. It's very hard. So stuttering is a communication disorder when by trying to over control our speech, we put all hard kind of shit into communication pipe.
Partly. I wouldn't say that's the full picture, but it's a very good assessment that most of the problems with stuttering come from the attempt to then control what is such a disorderly and uncontrollable thing. However, I will say that back to the absolutist versus relativist debate, which I think is the most interesting, really. Eugene, where are the potholes in the absolutist model?
Many.
There are many.
So one of them, one of them is the old. If you apply it in one scenario, you have to be able to apply it to others, because otherwise it's a stupid view. So if you strictly apply the absolutist view to stammering, and only stammering, it works fine, but it ignores the fact that if you expand the same logic to anything else, for instance, hair colour, eye colour, any disability whatsoever, it means there's obviously some which you cannot fix. For instance, your eye colour always will be what your eye colour is, regardless of what your views are on it.
True.
It won't change. If you have a leg missing, it won't grow back. You just have to accept it. And that sort of means the absolutist view is flawed because one of the assertions it has is that you can fix it, because otherwise it's a flawed. As far as a therapy goes, that has to be one of its rules, that it can be fixed, and then you have other questions like, can it be fixed in the first place?
Do you know what's the problem with it? With the idealistic, this absolute thing? is that there is no such thing. It doesn't exist. Ideal doesn't exist.
Yes.
So when we paint the image of our of a perfect speech in our head, and then we're trying to fit into that image, it's one of the stuttering problems that we paint those images of ourselves.
This is true.
Which we shouldn't, maybe.
Yeah.
I think really though the ideal is more meant to be a close approximation of the ideal. So Christopher Hitchens, even though he is an amazing speaker, is not the perfect speaker because he will obviously occasionally or and therefore he is human, but he is the closest approximation we have to the ideal rhetorician. He's the closest we can come. It's it's like there is no such thing as a utopia. There is no such thing as an ideal, because there will always be that grain of sand in the eye that will make it imperfect. So essentially, the absolute ideal is I think you're right. It's a misnomer. There is no absolute ideal, but there are those who come close, and it's those who form the best. They are the closest to the ideal.
And that's the relativist.
No. This is the absolutist one. This is them who are the closest to the ideal. But I think the biggest flaw I have with the absolutist position is that it basically says these roles, this hierarchy is fixed and it is immovable, and it says that the way that Christopher Hitchens speaks is the best way and will always be the best way of speaking.
Yeah, which is another flaw.
And the rest are fixed in their bad ways, and the only way that they can be better is to become more like Christopher Hitchens.
Like to clone him.
Oh, well, look.
Essentially,
Practically.
be more like this person is the underlying message.
Still not ideal. He doesn't talk in rhymes, right?
No, sure.
He still sucks.
Well, he sucks, but not. But he is closer than we are, and closer than many of us are, to the least sucky at speech.
So you could spin
According
to lots of what people say about him.
Okay. Is it possible that stuttering problem is a problem of self-identity? So we paint the images we want to be, and then we pretend we're it, but our ego is like, come on.
I think it's partly because as much as self-identity is such an integral part of how we stutter, there are so many that I've met who don't have an issue with their identity, or who at least claim to not have an identity issue.
They all claim.
Yeah, and there are those who, after like a head trauma, might start stuttering. They haven't had any kind of identity issue. They've had like a physical.
Exceptions. It's like less than 1%. It's
less than 1%, but still, it is a minority. Sure. I say that they are a minority, but I should say that for most people, you're right. Identity is a big one, if not the biggest thing about stuttering. Is how do I fit into the norm? And essentially, it's we deviate from the norm, and this is our problem. And we instill this message that we are wrong because we aren't the norm, and so we're constantly trying to fit into this
message.
Keep
spreading it.
Well, but you have to be proud about being outside of the norm. That's how you fix that problem. You say, I am low down this hierarchy. I don't care.
But then so I've had now more of a chance to think about this. If absolutist view is you're in the classroom and you're the one being picked on, and the relativist view therefore is the same thing, but you just think the class is full of assholes. No.
It's kind of I suppose. I suppose if you were to boil it down in some way.
I believe it's raining.
It's kind of spitting in a weird way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like there's like barely a cloud.
I'll be all right.
Anyway, it isn't enough to warrant an end of this podcast.
How about last subject? Did you guys do speaking van therapy?
No.
Speaking what? Speaking van or event?
Van. I think Alex
Forget about it.
No.
Next topic.
This sounds interesting. So tell me more.
Alex, take us through it.
I'll give you a website. You go. You buy therapy and do it.
Okay.
Anyway, you didn't do it. It's fine. So Tom, you are saying that techniques like hit and hold, block release, which you're doing while you're doing your deliberate fluency, they help you with the communication and less blocking, right? So
yeah.
So why don't you do more with them?
Wow. Well, for the hit and hold, I don't do that because I just find it a bit. I've just never been able to really master it very much.
Hit and hold, it's just a prolongation.
I know, same thing. It's same thing.
It's the fun one.
It's like whoa.
It's the one I enjoy the most.
Eugene is a master of a deepened breath tone and assertive on the hit and hold.
So that's what I.
Because the hit and hold one is the most fun, as you don't have to interrupt anything. You just let the air flow.
Okay.
Just fucking ages, and then you say the word.
Well, are you saying that I'm not using enough technique?
I'm saying,
at the moment?
well, I'm saying that maybe you're using your techniques for wrong reasons as well.
Okay, such as?
So look, there can be two reasons to use technique. One technique is, one reason is subconsciously you're trying to hide your stutter behind the technique.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a wrong way of doing it. And there is a right way of, a Maguire way of doing. You do it as a part of a disclosure.
It's more the latter.
To show your stutter, not to hide
it. It's more the latter. I was reaching a stage where I was hiding my stutter
behind the technique, right?
Yeah. So the technique is to show others that I'm stuttering.
Like look at all those techniques: hit and hold, mimic and stuttering.
Yeah, sure.
Block, release, mimic and stuttering is
it's
nothing
stuttering
else.
Modification. It's just modifying into a more acceptable, digestible pill.
Right.
That's what stuttering modification techniques are for. It's just to like shape it into a more controlled format, but it's still stuttering. Yeah. So essentially, it's because I want to show people and to show myself that I'm okay with stuttering. So that's what I'm doing to DD, maybe more than usual, because that is the most obvious form of stuttering, is the repetition of opening vowels or consonants on a word. So, but anyway, there's a topic that I wanted to talk about, was that in the intervening month or 2 months since we last spoke, how have both of your speech been faring? Has it been going strong?
Me, dude, how am I doing?
You sound, if I were to use an absolutist model of
63%.
fluency is the best thing ever, and stuttering like a fuck is terrible, you'd be on the up.
Oh, fuck yeah, thank you.
So you want to be it? You want to be higher up the hierarchy, don't you?
You want to climb the hierarchy.
You want to be the Christopher Hitchens, deep down inside.
No.
Yes, you do.
Well, yes, like why I use, like, what am I doing here, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get rid of fucking stuttering, right? And I mean,
stop trying to control. Wouldn't say stuttering.
No.
Okay,
I mean,
fair enough.
I don't know what really is
Don't say the truth, Alex. Come on.
Yeah. So
it's
I don't like it. I want to. Yeah. And the way to do it, apparently, it's going to self-actualize yourself as a person who stutters. So even though I don't want to do it, like, yeah, I'm doing it. But still, ultimate goal is the same: to whatever it takes, get rid of the fucking stuttering.
Well, you are definitely better than you were last time I saw you.
Oh, thank you.
I still...
You're a real friend, Tom. Like, still a good friend.
Eugene?
I have taken a different approach.
Is this the relativist approach?
Well, no, it's that because the view is you can't get rid of the stutter anyway. So, like, why bother trying it?
Wait.
Well, because
I'm like, I'm
well,
going to stammer anyway. So.
You say that, but there are people who have gotten rid of their stuttering, and this is
Sure.
the issue with the whole accept your stutter thing, because there are evidence of people who do get rid of it, and it's like, well, if that's the case, then
yeah, but
the whole true thing
falls under the category of
anomaly.
large numbers.
Yeah,
if you have sufficient samples, few of them will somehow fix it themselves.
It's the 1%. It's the outliers.
It's like
outliers of people.
out of 1,000 or 1,000,000 people who have cancer, and of the few thousand who smoke pot, one of them miraculously will be cured of cancer.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the smoking pot.
This is very
whatsoever.
true. this is very true.
Equally, it might do, but the other few thousand who smoke pot will still.
It's the outlier rule.
I have a question. When you talk about stuttering, do you mean blocking, or do you mean what you got genetically? Because you never got blocking genetically. What we got genetically is repetition and prolonging sound.
Yeah.
And then when we became self-conscious of, we start to block.
Yeah.
So I know that if I made myself block, I can unblock myself, and that's my goal. I know that I can't fuck with my genetics, I will always prolong sounds, repeat sounds. But if
well, you can fuck with the genetics, that's the thing.
Yes, I can. But if
I can repeat the sounds I stammer.
So look, when I say I hate stuttering, I want it out, I mean blocking. Exclusively.
So,
exclusively.
my view is that the thing I've been working on more has been to not allow it to interrupt communication. So, regardless of what that means, if it's like, well, I think I'm quite happy with the odd repeat.
I am as well.
If I need to say it, I should say it at least 3 times.
I want to
notice. Yeah, sure. But it's the extent to which you are repeating. So here it's the outlier thing again. It's the occasional block doesn't matter. If I'm fluent 90% of the time, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the approach I have is more because the standard I use is because your objective is communication. So if you repeat a few times, that's probably fine. If you block a bit, that's probably fine as well. If you're cool with it and you don't freak your listener out, because we convey or project, we can project our inner fears outside, and then people pick up on it. So if you're completely chill with that, that's the dream as I see it. That you put your listener at ease and just carry on stammering, because that means you don't stop your communication. You're still communicating properly, but just with the odd repeat and all sorts of other weird stuff on the way. But that's fine.
Throwing some weird, pretty weird head jokes here and there.
If stuttering is a
communication
disorder, right? So it's a result of a problem with the communication, and when we improve our communication one way or another, it makes stuttering go down, right?
Yeah.
In theory.
Yeah.
No. You didn't
big,
just talked about it.
Is because it makes
has the speech improved or not?
I reckon so.
Okay, then yes, you're right.
I think I still stammer a hell of a lot, but
like a boss.
But it's improved. I think it's more that there's the perception of stammering and the act of it. So it's like with this documentary about Tourette's. Like the act of Tourette's on its own, everyone loves it because but like 90% of the time, everything's tickety-boo. It's all good. There's the odd 10% which are horrendous. It's a bit like stammering in that regard. But the problem is, all the times it's horrendous has been other people are involved. Like there's other people's perceptions of it has become involved, which is out of that person's control. So if you split up that way, the physical act of my stammering hasn't really changed at all. I'm still stammering like a boss.
So the frequency of your repetitions hasn't changed?
Yeah, I would say it probably increased.
Okay. So it's increased?
Yeah.
But it's your perception that's changed.
My perception and how I feel towards stammering has changed.
Yeah.
I don't really care if I stammer, I don't really care if I'm fluent. Because I think the thing I've been trying to work on is to calm my listener. Like, chill, dude,
who are you talking to?
Like,
anxious people?
Yeah, you get a lot of weird looks in the zoo when you start stammering in front of people, because they have a perception that because you're out there and your job is to talk to people, you're going to be fluent.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
So that's probably why I like it, because it's a nice challenge. But the thing is, I think the communication isn't interrupted once the listener's at ease.
That's true.
I just simply tell them I stammer and just carry on explaining this stuff as before. Yeah. I don't even bat an eyelid.
It's like having a fly in your face. It's like, yeah, there's a fly in my face, but
just continue on. You can
move on. You can still speak to you like
this.
But
look, like what you did by doing a disclosure, you improved the communication. Like wow, right away, right? So that was a technique for communication improvement.
That's only because they asked me what's wrong with me. So I told them I stuttered.
Did they ask you?
Yeah.
Who asked you that?
So I just told them I stammer and they just carried on.
Who asked you that? What, random people
say? In the zoo,
Like, how did they word it? What's wrong with you?
Well, what is like, are you okay? I'm like,
I just stammer. As opposed to, what's wrong with you is a bit more harsh than,
like,
are you okay?
They ask, are you okay? And I go,
what's wrong with you?
I stammer.
Are you a freak? What's this, got a joke?
No, but like, it's I think partly because I just smooth over it super quick. Like, it's like saying, as you say, I have a fly in my face, just ignore it, it's fine. It has the same effect on the listener, like, because
it's still the fly.
You've told them it's cool. They're like, okay, it's cool.
Winnie Bugger man, fucking fly.
It's just a fly, man.
There's a...
That's my next disclosure. It's just a fly in my mouth. Fucking fly.
Then you can get like one of those plastic ones. Just keep it in your mouth and then stick your tongue out at them. See?
Look, Simon Bailey got kicked out of Maguire program for doing stuff like this.
I
mean, all the respect, Simon. Like,
we need to do that, dude. Okay.
I mean, I done it.
Yeah, but I need
you done it.
What?
With us. All this, Mr. No Holding Back.
Yeah.
So you've been there.
I think we should do the same. We should actually do the fly thing. That'd be hilarious.
That'd be a good one. That's a good way of representing stuttering, isn't it?
Because I would
make a metaphor.
Like, I love is like it might sound like joking, but it is a great way to literally to learn how to put your listener at ease, and then to just stammer like a boss anyway, because Because the one thing we learned previously is no one cares if you stammer. Literally,
It's true.
provided they know you stammer or can work it out quickly,
Yes.
they're chilled with
yes.
it. They are super chilled.
So they have to know.
Yeah.
The people must know.
People must
So,
know.
even if you
fifth state and shit. Yeah.
even if you put a fly in your mouth as well, they'll be like, he stammers, and for some unknown reason there's a fly in his mouth too. But that's cool.
But the people have been
We
told,
can live with that.
so it's
Yeah.
okay.
And they will probably ask you about the fly more than the stammering, because they'll be like,
Yeah. that's
stammering
true.
normal, fly in the mouth, that's just weird.
Yeah. Well, as in like stammering abnormal, fly freakishly abnormal.
yeah, it's just,
Too abnormal
yeah.
for
so
abnormal, you know?
you could make then the, to bring it back to the absolutist view, rather than saying this person is the best speaker, the least worst speaker.
Yes.
And then
that implies that there is a best.
No,
It does. If you say something's
implies
that
there's a worst,
as in,
not a best.
yeah, but like for there to be a worst, you have to have something to compare it to. Like you like
Someone
like you
better
can say like
than
okay, like
you
say
on this day.
let's say that there's a 100-meter sprint
yeah,
and everyone finishes the race
yeah,
within like 0.1 seconds of each other.
yeah.
The best runner is still only 0.1 seconds
Yeah,
than the worst runner.
yeah.
But but like essentially it's there will always be a best and a worst. If you say something is a worst or
Yeah.
a best, there has to be someone who is worse for that best to mean anything, or for that worst to mean anything, essentially. So worst
yeah.
implies best.
And that
This other side
Also-
of absolutism.
means it has to be measurable. And the other, if it is measurable, another question is it really worth this tiny difference?
That's true. That's a good question.
Absolutism is non-measurable, but it has a result at the end. But when relativism is measurable, but can be measured maybe by uncomparable things at all. So, and the way it works. If we were idealists, absolutists, at this moment, this is our best podcast.
Yeah.
Because this is how far the whole thing took us
Yes.
to that best podcast.
Yes, this is our best podcast by
So
that metric.
And if we make another one, let's
will
hope
be-
so.
but-
That will be the next best one
Yeah.
because it's all
Very
the
true.
result, right? So that's
It's sequential.
Yes. Well, absolutism is a sequential. Idealism, you just keep discovering the new
Best.
unknown
Yeah.
sides of it of absolute, which is unreachable. But when we compare to what we did before, I'll say we've done better.
What, as in this is a
Yeah. So
a less good?
if we're doing like a relativity Einstein-wise, that podcast might be not the best, including our future podcasts.
This one.
Yeah, maybe it's not.
That's subjective because
And
what
that's
is
exactly
good or
my
bad
point,
is
you see?
against subjective.
And that was exactly my point. That when you have a relativism, it actually has no answer.
Yeah, it has no answer other than your own personal
But then
answer.
you can compare. But when you have a absolutism, it's not comparable. But you have an answer.
Yeah. Anyway, lads,
Yeah.
I must be off.
So
it's now 7 o'clock.
thank you for listening.
Finding Voices podcast.
Which episode? 19?
17.
17. How do you know this,
17.
Alex?
17. I pay attention to this shit
And
You watch it.
every night.
I'm
That's why we have
your bedtime
so
show.
many views. We are the best stuttering podcast in this universe,
Fuck yeah.
but not by the views.
Yeah. Views are just one way of measuring it, but It's all relative though.
We don't give a fuck.
We do quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Which is so questionable.
Right,
Fuck this.
so
Bye for now.
bye for now.
Bye for now. Bye for now.